Recording. Okay, why don't you go on ahead and start right now?
Okay. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Feel free, I know, to let me know if you have any questions through Division 10. You can send me an email. Bob Belt should be able to help you get in contact with me, or I'll catch you at one of the other meetings.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Good job, Kevin. Gonna shut her down here.
Okay.
Not even ask some of the questions.
This is my presentation I did about a year and a half ago with Bluegrass Railroad Club. It was about custom coal loads, which I've done quite a bit, and I know a lot of the folks in Division 10 have done it, along with many other folks with NMRA. But this was my way of going about building coal loads, and I had learned a lot of this from either talking to folks with the team, going out to shows, or just watching a lot of YouTube videos. So based on doing this several times over and over again, I decided to do a presentation on it and show how I did it. And I do this over like a 5 day span. You could probably do it sooner or a little bit shorter time, but this is how I put it all together. So let me tell you about how all this goes about. So the first day, which is the busiest day, is about measuring all your various hoppers. Because if you've seen what I've seen before, and I'm sure most people in the club. Every hopper or most hoppers have different sizes, not just the lengthwise, but also the width, even the depth. So you want to measure those out first before you start doing cutting of any type of foam. And foam is what I use as the base for building my custom hoppers. So once I have those measurement those hoppers, I cut my foam out and I use it with a electric foam cutter. Also, before I start doing any gluing or painting or putting rocks in there, I'm going to take those little foam strips and make sure they actually fit in the hoppers. Usually, I'll cut them a little bit wider or deeper or longer than it's necessary, because if you come too short and you got those gaps, you'll have rocks falling all over the place. But I'll start that and start, and as I start seeing how the strips are cut, I'll start shaving the stuff off the side and on the edges just to make sure I have a nice, firm setting for that foam. And once I know it's set in there real well, the last part on day one is I'm going to seal it, because with foam, it's real porous. And since I'm going to be painting, I want a nice solid layer on there. And I use this thing called Flex Paint, or actually called Scenic Flex Paint, which is by Wooden Scenics. I use that on all the strips. I usually do on the top, maybe on the sides. I don't necessarily have to do on the bottom, but I get that nice seal on this styrofoam, so none of the paint or anything will pour through it or cause the foam to shrink. So after I get all that done in day one, which is my busiest day, I'll use day two to paint the strips. And in this case, since I'm using coal, I'm just painting it in basic black. Let that set for a day. And then the next day, day number three, I'm going to be throwing my first layer of rock on it. Actually, I'm going to use tacky glue. It can be any type of glue, but I prefer to use tacky. And I paint it all across the top. Don't need to do it on the sides. I'll take that and I'll stick it in the rock to give it a nice, flat, solid layer and let that set for a day. Day four, I'll come back and actually set these little strips with the rock that's already on it in the hoppers, and I'll start by hand adding extra rock and glue, so I get an unnatural look. Now, is it realistic to what you see nowadays? Maybe not, but it gives it a realistic effect to me as it's going down the track. That coal is going to move around all the place, so every hopper load looks different from the other. And then with all that done, let's see how it works on the layout. So that's really how I've built this whole presentation. Yeah, it's got a lot of bullet points, but I got more pictures than bullet points. So we'll get to the pictures because nothing says how this works better than a picture. Picture says 1,000 words. So this is all the different type material I'm using. Loose rock. Actually, I got a rock I got from Michael's. Instead of using the rock you might get from like Wooden Scenes, which is usually around 14, $50. This type of rock I have, and I'll show it later on the presentation, is about $4. Looks realistic. It's a lot cheaper. I know some folks have told me that if they've gone out to get coal from the side of the roads when they've been on the highways, you can take that and crush it up. But I did not know about this for this presentation, but this little canister rock, which I got at Michael's, is the key to putting these coal loads together. Tacky glue, as I've already mentioned, with a thing called scenic cement. You could use half and half, 50% water, 50% Elmer's glue or some mixture to mix it up. If you instead use it with scenic cement, it's probably cheaper, but either one of them will work. Pipettes, droplets, so you can put that across the board. Since you're using glue, and especially that tacky glue, you might want to make sure you have plenty of paper towels. You don't want, and also paint, because you don't want any of that getting on a nice surface and destroying like tables and stuff. Paint brushes, you'll need that. And I'll also use a metal ruler as I'm cutting my strips. I have a nice flat surface, or so I can go right down that and have a nice straight cut when I'm making the cuts on these on this foam. Funnel's real useful because as I use rock and I have leftover rock, I'll use funnel for the container that the rock came into and pour it back in there so I can re-leverage it for additional co-loads down the road. So there's a picture of all the materials right there. So that little canister is where I'm going to pour the rock in later on, and I'll be sticking my first layer of loads into that as I start making these. And also one thing about doing loads, I do these in batches. I don't just do one hopper at a time. I like to do 6, 7, 8, as many as possible because of the amount of work you put into this and the time it takes to make these. The more hoppers I can do in a batch, the better it is for me. It's just time saving. Oh, also one thing about the foam, I don't usually go out and buy this. If you buy enough stuff like I do off Amazon, you're going to get foam. So I just take that foam that comes in the packaging and re-leverage that for my co-loads. So day one, as I mentioned a moment ago, I like to do hoppers in batches. In this particular presentation, I'm going to be doing 6 of them. This saves a lot of time. As I go through that, I'm going to measure all the various hoppers and start cutting off that foam for each hopper. Each hopper have its own little strip. One thing as I'm doing this, I use little push pins at the bottom of this because as I'm painting stuff or I'm putting glue or I'm putting the flex paste on there, I like the air to circulate around these strips. Also, on the bottom, I'm going to be putting like a label that I know this strip matches this car, so I can turn it upside down and see, oh, this is the strip that belongs to this hopper, without me getting my fingers on the paste or the paint or whatever and causing indentions or getting my fingers all messy. These little push pins come in real handy, and it's a little trick I've learned over the time. So there I am measuring the hopper. This is the length of it. Looks like about a 5 inches and a half. But don't forget to do the width, which is in this case about 1.25 inches. You might even want to measure the depth as well, but depths go in and out. The main thing is I'm going to make these real thin. So here's where I'm doing this one strip here. I've measured out for about 5 inches and a half. So I'm going to cut that through it. And then since this strip is a little bit longer, I'll have to make some more cuts. This is about 1.5 inches. I only need 1.25 inches in this case, so I've made marks there. Even this is probably pretty thick for the hopper given this depth. I'll probably even take this strip and cut in half. So this one strip here might actually help me make 2 strips for 2 separate hoppers. Just more of the measurements. One thing you might notice, and I've seen this with a lot of styrofoam, you might have indentions. Like that bottom one there, you'll see like a dent, like somebody's taking a tack, somebody pushing into it. I don't really worry about that because with the flex paste I'm gonna be using, that will fill in there, and you give it a good day to dry, that will fill in, and you really won't notice that much. Even on top of that, as you paint it and you throw rock on top of it, you will not notice the indentions at all. So now that I've got all these measurements, I'm ready to cut these foam strips using my electric foam cutter. And I will probably need to make adjustments as I start fitting them and measure them along the way. So this is the foam cutter I use in my case. I've used it for many years. It's given me very good quality. I think this was an Amazon purchase. Didn't need to throw a lot of money into it, but it's really been holding up its own as I've been making mini hoppers, mini co-hoppers. So this is what it looks like when turned off, and you flip that little red switch down there, and that little green light comes on. That lets you know when it's ready to go. And if you've never used these before, be sure don't keep it too close to your skin, at least the top part, because you can burn yourself. So here I'm using my straight edge, my metal ruler here. You might see my finger at the top. I've kind of pushed it back a little bit, so as I cut through that, the electric foam cutter will not touch my skin. I won't give myself a nasty burn. Here's about 4 of the strips, and as I mentioned before, you might see some of these little indentions there. I'm not really worried about that because when I put the flex paste on top of it, it will cover that all up, and after a day, it'll be nice and sealed. There they are. That's a little bit more thinner. And also, one of the good things about the flex, foam will bend on you, kind of like Georgia pine will. That flex paste will make it nice and hard. I'll do it on the top and the edges. I don't usually do it underneath there. I guess you could if you really want to make it stronger, but it's not really. I have not really done that in most of my cases. Not been necessary. Now that I've got all this cut, I'm going to take each of these strips and I'm going to place them on all the various hoppers to make sure they fit and adjust some. I might do some cutting along the edges to make sure they fit inside there. Usually I push them in there. I'll want to pull them back up because I got to put the flex paste on there. That's where toothpicks come in real handy. Sometimes you if you feel comfortable enough, you can use a modeling knife, hobby knife. I'm sometimes a little leery because I don't want to cut my car or scrape or paint or anything like that off of that. But if you feel comfortable using a hobby knife, you can use that to pull these strips back out once you have them fitted. So here's one of the strips laying completely on top. It does not fit in there right now, but I'll be making adjustments along the length and sides, maybe even underneath that until it fits in there nicely. I've made my adjustments in this case. Now that foam fits in there real nice. I might have some little gaps, but I'm not worried about that. You might see the gap there on the right. But as you put flex paste on there, paint, it's going to make it a little bit thicker. It will fit in there real nice. That was one before, but remember I'm doing this for a batch. So I've done a batch here of 6 hoppers, and there's the 6 I'm working with. They all fit in there real nice. Given that, I take each one of those little guys out and I label it underneath there. In particular, I've been doing here a batch of C&O hoppers. In particular, this one car here is 32, 54, 75. I will do this very similar to all the other strips I'm doing. So I know this particular strip fits this particular car. And that will be underneath it. Here's the push pins. These push pins are underneath it. I probably will even put push pins in the middle as you're putting the flex paste on there and you're painting. That extra weight might tend to make it sag in the middle. By putting some push pins underneath it, they'll prevent that sagging from happening. Here it is sitting up on top, ready to go. I'm ready to start putting flex paste on top of it. And also, given that it's up off my board there, that air will circulate underneath there to help it seal and dry faster. There's all 6 of them prepped and ready to be pasted. So my last part of my day is sealing all this stuff. And as I mentioned, it eliminates all the pores, all the sagging, reducing it, everything. It gives it a nice harder fixture. It even adds a little extra weight to it other than the rock that's going to be on top of it. And there's the flex paste I use by Woodland Scenics. I use a little, I think most people will use paint brushes on that. I can't imagine pouring it on there. I always use a paintbrush. Now, I don't you really can see it too well, but some of those have been, got the paste on there. It has kind of a shiny glow on it, but all these have been painted with the flex paste and they'll be set to the side so they can dry overnight. So a day's gone by, we're into day 2. Assuming they've all dried, usually in most cases I've seen they all dry after about a day. I'm ready to start putting some paint on this. And the reason I put black paint on there because I don't want white showing through rock that would not look very realistic. I always put a layer of paint on there, maybe even on the sides so nothing comes around the edges. But I'll put at least a good layer of black paint on top of it and around the edges. Don't need to do it underneath the strips. So there's my batch. All 6 of them have been painted. And if you're interested, this is the type of paint I use. This also came from Michaels. It's a Craft Smart premium caulky. It's worked for me. You might use other paints, but in my case, this works fine. I was not too picky about the paint as long as I had the underneath layer black. So the rock gets on top of it, you're just putting black on black, and so none of that white will pour through. That was day 2, just painting. Day 3 is where I'm going to put my first layer of rock on these strips. I use tacky glue, and I'll use a brush to paint each one of those strips with the tacky glue. And once that's done, I'll take each strip, usually maybe with the push pins underneath it, grab it, and I will paste it right down on a batch of rock that I got poured in a little bitty pan. So there's my strips. You'll see the pan at the top with the rock I'm going to leverage, and there's the tacky glue and my paintbrush ready to be used to, to paint that tacky glue on there. So there's my pan. I'll take that rock. And there's a little bit closer look if you're interested in this rock. It's called Ashland. I found it in the very back of a Michael's store. It's usually where they have a lot of greenery where people are making plants and stuff. But that's where I lucked up and lucked out and found that, and it's worked for me quite a bit. Matter of fact, I've even used it on layouts where coal's been spelt out. They even have gray rock that I use for ballast. So it can be used for a lot of different things other than just coal loads. There's some of the rock that's poured into this pan, and I will take those strips out after I got the tacky glue on there. I'll turn it upside down and just place it flat onto that pan, so I got a nice flat layer of rock. That's my first layer, my base layer of rock. Here's the tacky glue, and I will not squirt it on there. I actually will take off the top with the paintbrush, dip into that to get a nice amount of glue, and I will actually start spreading it on these strips. Here's an example where I've got a little bit of the glue on it. You can see the difference between the dry paint, either to the right or left, and then the glue that has that glossy look to it. And I will actually do that across the entire strip, just the top part. Here's from the side angle, and you can see I got a push pin underneath there because all this extra weight might start causing these strips to start sagging a little bit. Gives you a little difference from the side here. And there is where I've taken that strip that's been fully painted with the tacky glue, turned it upside down, and place it right directly on top of the rock in the pan. So I have a single layer of rock. There's a single strip turned back upright. You can see the push pins underneath there, almost blends in with the pan. And that's what one strip looks like with the rock on it with the glue, and the other 5 are ready to go. And there's the other 5 also with their first layer. This is a good example of why I like doing this in batches, because it's a lot of work. The more of these cars I can do in a day or in a single batch, the better it is for me. Here's a side view. You might notice when you're doing this, if you do it but through this approach, some rocks might get on the side of that. I don't really worry about that too much, because as you put these strips into your hoppers, the hopper will actually lift that rock up, and it'll just look like it's just extra layering on top. So I'm not too concerned if there's rock on the side. As you're pushing in there, the rock will lift up, and it'll just be extra rock on top of the strip for you. So after a day that dries, I got a nice layer. I'm going to be taking each one of these strips, I'll be putting them in the hoppers and adding additional rock by hand. And then after I got the rock added on there to give it an unnatural look, I'll first fill the entire top layer with denatured alcohol. You could just use, I guess, other type alcohols. I was told a long time ago to use denatured. It's worked for me. But I'm sure you can use isopropyl alcohol would do the same thing. The main thing is the alcohol allows your glue to get inside the rock and spread evenly. So when you want this to set, none of that rock's falling off. You can turn it upside down, that rock won't fall off. You could use the instead of a scenic cement, you could use, as I mentioned before, a 50-50 combination of water glue mixture, and it should do the same thing for you. And I'm also going to use pipettes to distribute not just the alcohol, but the glue, either the scenic cement glue or your 50-50 water glue mixture. So here's all these strips. There's my denatured alcohol at the top, scenic cement ready to go, and my dropper and hoppers there on the side. So here's my first hopper. I turned it upside down. Oh, that's the one that matches this car. That's good. I know which strip matches which car. So I'll work on this 101-054 first. Of course, taking the pins out, I push in there, and there you can see it kind of flat sets in there. It's just a little bit below the edges, which is fine, but I'm going to be adding more rock to it. Actually, what I'll do, since this is now sitting there, I'll take the car with the load that's currently in there, and I'll put it in that little tray at the top and add additional rock by hand. There's all the hoppers with their strips in there with their first layer of rock. And here's one of the hoppers actually in the pan with the rock underneath it. I'll probably just take rock around the sides, pick it up, sprinkle it on top. So if some of it falls off, it's just falling back in the pan. I can re-leverage it for the same hopper or for other hoppers. Or if I have extra rock later, I can use it for batches later on. See, I'm not sure if you can see this too well, but I have taken some rock here and sprayed it on top of this hopper. You might have little ups and downs, which is fine. I'm trying to give an unnatural look, and also making sure that if there is like edges on the side of the hopper, I fill that with rock as well. Now that I got the rock or the amount of rock I want on the hopper, this is where I'm going to put my first layer of alcohol. This is going to allow the glue to go all over the rock equally or distribute the glue equally around the entire strip. And I'm going to use that little pipette there to do it. And I usually do it to the top, the corners, around the edges, so forth. So I get a nice even distribution of that alcohol. And I'll do the same thing for the scenic cement. If you got a little little dish around the house, you can leverage that instead of having to dip into the can. You can pour some of that out. Be sure and clean it out afterwards. But that's how I usually go about this. I'll pour some out as much as I think I'm going to need for this batch. Use my pipette to pull that out. And then I'll start distributing down in the middle as I'm doing here. And I'll do the corners up the sides, down the sides. And then I should have a nice glossy look or like a wet look to it. As you do this, you might notice you might put too much in there that it'll start draining out the bottom. That's where those napkins come into play. I don't have napkins in this particular shot, but the napkins being underneath this will catch that extra alcohol that you're putting in there. Given that, also take consideration not to put too much glue because that will go everywhere as well. And also be careful if it does come out, not to let it get too close to your wheels or also your couplers because that will cause them to stick. So here is my first layer of glue I'm using. I do the same approach as I did the alcohol down the middle, the corners, down the sides, up the sides. So I get a nice distribution of glue to hold that rock in place. And there's the first one. Now that I have this extra rock, this is where this funnel comes in very handy. This is probably a dollar purchase, probably at like Dollar Tree, but its value is immense. Instead of having rock everywhere, I'll show you how to use that funnel. I'll put it right back in the little container, and the rock that's in that little pan, I pour it through the funnel and goes right back in the container for future batches I'll do later on. And there's all the rock there that I did not use back in the container. So that's all good. Now I got all this batches. Hopefully after the fourth day, when into day 5, all this has been created. It's all dried, ready to go. But it'd be nice if I could put this out in the layout. So let me show you some scenes of the layout I have at my home here in the basement. Well, actually, here's the my first batch of cars, all 6 of them all ready to go. And this is from a side view of that batch along with a bunch of others. Now, on this particular video, I have everything's got a coal load except for one car. I need to get that one loaded with some coal, but this is a lot of coal cars. All of them that should look different. You should see the bumps up and down along it from the side view, giving an unnatural look as though the cars have been moving a long time and that coal has been moving around on top. And one last view from a top. We saw it on the side. What's it look like from above? This gives you a different perspective. And there's that empty hopper I need to fix up.
Like,
And that is it.